Hello and welcome back to Critical Reflection. By now, you've likely identified some specific experience that you're trying to reflect on and learn from. And you've probably also gone so far as to also unpack the so what criteria and identified why this experience was important. So now we're going to go the one step further and look at now what? How are you going to take these learnings forward, and how are these learnings going to influence your behaviors and actions in the future? This is when you hear, like, how do we learn from mistakes? This is exactly what it is. This is the now what. So for now what, we're going to reflect using these criteria and prompts. And again, you might be just picking one of them, or you might be looking at all three of these. So criteria number 5 is cause and effect relationship. Criteria number 6 is other possible responses. And criteria number 7 is future planning. So let's look at each of these right now. In your reflections, you'll be picking whichever one feels the most obvious. So cause and effect relationship. This is criteria number 5. You need to explain your experience by generating a cause and effect model. This kind of is very similar to the so what, and maybe you've identified some of these aspects when you were looking at the experience in more broadly. But here we're looking to see directly how actions related to outcomes. This can be either desirable or undesirable. What happened and what was the outcome because of that? Also, how did this outcome meet your expectations? Sometimes you might have thought you might have been doing something to achieve some desired outcome, but the outcome was different. It wasn't what you expected. That's valuable to understand what it was that led to that unexpected outcome. So a tip here is correlation is not causation. Just because two things happen doesn't necessarily mean that they're related. So your job here is to kind of unpack and build that connection to show how some action led to some outcome, what caused an effect. Criteria number 6, other possible responses. I'd say this is a more fun one. What could you have done differently, and how would that have affected the outcome, for better or for worse? So be creative about thinking about new ways of doing things. Human beings are unique in that we don't actually have to have the experience to learn from it. What would have happened if, instead of saying something, you kept your mouth shut? What would have happened if you, instead of picking option A, you picked option B? Try to play this scenario out in your head, and think about what would have gone differently. The tip here is to be creative. This is an opportunity to explore without consequences. If you told your boss off, what do you think might have happened? This doesn't actually involve you telling your boss off and learning the hard way what might have happened. Criteria number 7, future planning. So in this step, or in this criteria, we want to develop a plan for your next steps. This is actually a lot harder than it sounds. We really need to be specific. When are we going to do things? When are things going to happen? How are we going to? These details are important. Also, how will you measure success? This is one that we often leave out. How do we know that the plan will have been affected? How will we know that we actually followed the plan? How will you overcome challenges? Lots of times we say, oh yeah, we'll go to the client and tell them what happened. But what if they don't want to hear it? Or what if you can't find them? Oftentimes the plans we make don't actually happen. And oftentimes the reason, and here's the tip, most plans aren't followed because they lack detail. The example that you've probably heard me give in class, students always say, I'm going to study harder. Well, what does that actually mean? Does it mean you're going to start studying earlier? Does it mean you're going to study for longer periods of time? Does it mean you're going to study on Wednesday and Thursday evenings? Does it mean you're going to study at the library? Does it mean you're going to study with friends? So you can see where I'm going with this. We need to be specific about our plans so we can know afterwards whether or not we actually follow them. So the secret, as always, is for each criteria to explain how or why the experience is relevant to your learning. And again, practice, practice, practice. So by now you've looked at, you've likely done the entire reflection framework. You've identified something, you've looked at why it's important, and now what you're going to do about it. And so you can look over these and kind of polish things up, or you can go a little bit deeper. If you need to get back to one of the other framework criteria, you can get back to what and so what right down below. So thank you for joining, and good luck on your future reflection endeavors.